The little black girl knocked at the metro office, crying her mother's bag was removed by unknown men. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's dive into today's story. It was a regular day at the metro office, but that all changed when a little girl burst through the door, her tiny body shaking uncontrollably as she cried out for help. She couldn't have been more than 10 years old, her face streaked with tears, and her breath came in short gasps. She looked around desperately, her wide eyes locked onto the nearest person, and before anyone could react, she stumbled forward, her voice barely a whisper. "They took my mom's bag," she sobbed. The office was filled with the usual noise of phones ringing and the hum of fluorescent lights, but everything seemed to fade away as her words hit the air. The employees froze, exchanging confused glances, unsure of what to make of the situation. The girl's eyes darted around the room as she clutched her arms tightly across her chest, as though shielding herself from an invisible threat. "Please," she cried again, "they took it. I don't know where they went." The words didn't seem to make sense at first. A bag? Why was it so urgent? But it was the look of sheer terror in her eyes that made everyone stop. She wasn't just scared. She was frantic, her small hands trembling as she pointed in the direction of the street outside. The office clerk, a middle-aged woman named Karen, cautiously stepped forward. "Honey, are you okay? Where is your mom?" she asked gently. The little girl's head snapped up, her eyes wide with fear. "They took her. They took her bag and her too," she said, her voice breaking with each word. Karen felt her heart drop. "Who took her? Can you tell us anything about them?" The girl hesitated, swallowing hard, trying to control the sobs that racked her tiny frame. "I don't know, they were men. Bad men. They said they were going to take my mom to make her stop talking. I think they took her to the hospital, or somewhere far away." Karen's blood ran cold. This wasn't just a lost bag. This was something far worse. "Did you see what they looked like? Can you remember anything about them?" Karen asked, kneeling down to the girl's level. The little girl nodded, wiping her eyes with the back of her sleeve. "They wore suits. Black suits. And I think they had something on their hands," she said, her voice trembling. "Like gloves, but I don't know why." Karen's mind raced. This was no ordinary robbery. There was something sinister happening here, something far beyond what the little girl could understand. Karen immediately called for help. She dialed the police, but deep down, she knew that time was running out. The little girl's story didn't add up. She was too terrified for it to be a simple misunderstanding. She had seen something, witnessed something that was not supposed to be known by a child. The girl had no idea just how deep the danger went, but Karen could feel the weight of it in the air. She stood up, looking at her colleagues. "We need to find her mother," she said, her voice steady but laced with urgency. "And we need to do it now." The atmosphere in the room had shifted completely. The usual office chatter had died down, replaced by the heavy sense of impending danger that hung like a cloud over the place. The little girl had made one thing clear. She was in grave danger, and whatever had happened to her mother was far from ordinary. The question now was, who were these men, and what did they want with her mother? "I can see the urgency in your eyes." The little girl had just rushed into the office, her voice trembling as she described the terrifying ordeal of her mother being taken by strange men in suits. But now the time was running out. Karen, the office clerk, had made the call to the police, but deep down, she knew that just waiting for help wasn't going to cut it. The girl was in danger, and if the men had already gotten to her mother, there was no time to waste. Karen felt the weight of responsibility on her shoulders as she looked at her colleagues. "We can't wait for the authorities," she said, her voice steady but urgent. "We need to go now. We need to find her mother." The little girl, still trembling, nodded at Karen, her eyes wide with fear. "Please, hurry," she whispered. "They're going to hurt her if you don't." Karen nodded firmly, her mind racing. She knew the risks, but she also knew that time was the one thing they couldn't afford to lose. With the little girl clinging to her side, Karen quickly grabbed her coat, her heart pounding in her chest. "Come on," she said, glancing at the office. "We're going after them." The group quickly mobilized, with two of Karen's co-workers, Dave and Mia, ready to follow her lead. What do we know so far? Dave asked as they quickly walked towards the door. She said they were wearing black suits, and they had gloves on. Karen said, her voice tight with the urgency of the situation. They must be professionals, but why take a bag? Mia, who had been silently listening, spoke up. Maybe they weren't after the bag at all. Maybe it was just a cover. They were after something inside it. Karen nodded, her thoughts racing. She had to find out what was inside that bag and, more importantly, where her mother was. The team made their way out of the building and into the cool evening air. The city street was busy with the usual crowd, but the weight of the situation made the world feel distant. It was as though they were moving in slow motion, knowing that they were running out of time. They reached the street corner, where the little girl had pointed earlier. This is where they took her, the girl said, her voice barely above a whisper. Karen looked around, taking in the area. Do you know where they went? She asked, kneeling to the girl's level. They went towards the alley, the girl replied, pointing to a narrow path between two buildings. I saw the silver SUV parked there. Karen's heart skipped a beat. The silver SUV. It was the same vehicle the girl had mentioned before. Without wasting another moment, Karen motioned for the others to follow her as they headed down the alley. The darkness seemed to swallow them as they moved further into the narrow space. The sound of their footsteps echoing off the walls. As they rounded the corner, Karen stopped dead in her tracks. Ahead, near the back of the alley, stood the silver SUV. It was parked at an angle, its engine still running. The unmistakable sound of a door slamming shut echoed in the stillness. Stay quiet, Karen whispered. The group crept closer, staying in the shadows. They could hear voices now, low and muffled, coming from the direction of the SUV. Karen motioned for them to stay put. She needed to get a closer look. Moving swiftly but carefully, she inched forward, staying hidden behind a stack of cardboard boxes. The voices became clearer. We need to make sure she doesn't talk, a man's voice said. Once we have the information, we'll get rid of the rest. Karen's blood ran cold. They weren't talking about a bag. They were talking about the mother, and whatever it was that she knew. It was something they wanted badly enough to hurt her. What do we do now? Dave whispered, his voice tight with fear. Karen didn't hesitate. We confront them, she said firmly. We have to get to her before it's too late. The group moved into position, ready to make their move. But just as they were about to approach the SUV, a shadow appeared in front of them. A man, dressed in black, stepped into the alley from a side door. His eyes scanned the area, and Karen knew they had been spotted. She turned to her team, signaling for them to move quickly. The man turned towards them, his face hardening as he saw the group advancing. What the hell are you doing here? He barked, his hand moving towards his jacket. Karen stepped forward, her voice calm but resolute. We're here for the girl's mother. We know you have her. The man's eyes flickered with a moment of surprise, but it was gone in an instant. You shouldn't have come, he said coldly. And just like that, everything changed. The situation was no longer just about a missing bag or a kidnapping. It was about survival. And now Karen and her team were caught in a race against time, facing off against dangerous men who would stop at nothing to keep their secrets hidden. Get ready, Karen whispered to her team. This is just the beginning. The tension in. The alley was thick, and Karen knew they had to act fast if they were going to save the girl's mother and uncover the truth before it was too late. I can feel the tension in the air. Karen and her team stood frozen, their hearts pounding as the man in black approached. The alley was quiet now, the only sounds the hum of distant traffic and the heavy breathing of the group. The moment of confrontation had arrived. You shouldn't have come, the man said, his voice low, almost mocking. Karen stepped forward, her stance firm. We're not leaving without her, she said, her voice cutting through the silence. The man's gaze shifted, a flicker of doubt crossing his face, but it was gone just as quickly as it had come. He straightened, his posture now tense. I don't think you understand the situation here, he said, pulling something from inside his jacket. Karen's heart raced, but she kept her cool, knowing this was the moment she had to stay calm. I understand perfectly, she replied. You're going to let her go now. But the man didn't flinch. He raised his hand, and that's when Karen saw the gun. The barrel was pointed straight at her, but she didn't step back. Stay where you are, the man warned, his finger barely touching the trigger. Karen's pulse quickened, but she knew this wasn't the time to panic. Her eyes flickered over to Dave and Mia, signaling them to stay still. The girl, still trembling, had backed away, her small form shaking in fear. "Please," the girl whispered, "save my mom." The words hit Karen like a punch to the gut. She couldn't back down now, not with the girl depending on her. "You don't have to do this," Karen said, her voice steady despite the fear rising in her chest. "We just want the girl's mother. Let her go, and this can all end peacefully." The man didn't answer. He took a step forward, his eyes narrowing as he sized them up. Karen could tell he wasn't the one in charge. He was a hired muscle, a man doing someone else's bidding. She needed to find out who was behind all of this. "You think you can just walk in here and save the day?" he sneered. "You have no idea what you're up against." Karen's heart skipped a beat, but she refused to show fear. "We'll find out, one way or another," she said, her voice hardening. The man's lips curled into a cruel smile. "I don't think you'll get the chance." Just as he took another step forward, the sound of engines revving echoed down the alley. Karen turned to see the unmistakable sight of motorcycles approaching. A group of bikers, wearing leather jackets with patches that read Thunderwolves MC, appeared at the far end of the alley. The man in black's face paled as the bikers pulled into view. Karen couldn't help but feel a rush of relief. The bikers had arrived. "What is this?" the man asked, his voice suddenly laced with uncertainty. "This is where you get out of our way," one of the bikers, a tall man with a deep voice, said. "You have no idea who you're messing with." The man in black hesitated, then took a step back, but Karen knew the confrontation wasn't over. The bikers were here to help, but they couldn't let their guard down. The man in black looked at them, sizing up the group, and then his eyes landed on Karen. "You don't know who you're dealing with," he spat, his hand still gripping the gun. "But I'm not going anywhere until I get what I came for." Karen's gaze didn't waver. "What's in that bag?" she asked, her voice sharp. The man sneered. "None of your business." Just then, the sound of footsteps echoed from behind them. Two more men appeared, both wearing dark suits, walking briskly towards the confrontation. The bikers, sensing the increase in tension, shifted into position, surrounding the man in black and his backup. The newcomers didn't seem fazed by the bikers. They stopped just short of the group, and one of them spoke. "Let him go, Jimmy," the man said to the man with the gun. "We're not here for a fight. We just want the girl's mother." Karen's mind raced. These were the men behind it all, the ones pulling the strings. The man in black, now identified as Jimmy, looked from the bikers to the two men and back again. The standoff was on the brink of violence, but Jimmy seemed to hesitate. He lowered his gun, but only slightly. "You don't get it," he muttered, glancing at the newcomers. "She's not just some girl. She's part of something bigger. We don't care about your game," one of the bikers growled. "We just want the kid's mother, and we're not leaving without her." The two men in suits exchanged a look, then stepped aside. "Fine," the first man said. "You can have her. But know this, what's coming next won't be easy." The tension in the air was thick as the group moved forward. Karen's eyes followed the men, her heart still pounding, as they finally led her to the place where the girl's mother was being held. What they found next would change everything. They reached the back of an old, run-down building, where the door opened to reveal a small, dimly lit room. And there, lying unconscious on the floor, was the girl's mother. Her face was bruised, her clothes torn, but she was alive. Karen rushed to her side, her breath catching in her throat. "We got her," Karen whispered, relief flooding her chest. But the story was far from over. The real danger was only just beginning. I can feel the tension in the air as Karen crouched beside the girl's mother, checking for signs of life. The woman was battered, bruised, and unconscious, but at least she was breathing. Her chest rose and fell with shallow breaths, the faintest sign of life. Karen's heart raced, but she knew they had to act fast. "Is she okay?" the little girl asked, her voice trembling as she looked at her mother. Karen nodded, though her stomach churned with uncertainty. "She's going to be okay," she said, but deep down, she wasn't sure. The room around them was eerily quiet. The two men in suits had stepped back, but their eyes never left the group. They were waiting for something. Waiting for Karen and the bikers to make their next move. The tension was palpable. Dave and Mia stood by, scanning the room for any sign of danger. But Karen knew the danger wasn't over yet. She could feel it in her bones. "We need to get her to a hospital," Karen said, her voice firm, trying to mask the fear she felt. The bikers, who had been silently observing the situation, moved into action. Bear, the massive biker with the cold eyes, kneeled beside Karen and gently lifted the woman into his arms. Despite his rough exterior, there was an unmistakable tenderness in his movements. "I've got her," he said softly. "Let's get out of here." The group began to move quickly, the sound of boots echoing in the dark room. As they stepped back into the alley, Karen could see the uncertainty in the little girl's eyes. "Is my mom really going to be okay?" she asked again, her voice barely above a whisper. Karen met her gaze, her heart breaking. "Yes," she said, her voice steady, though her mind was racing. They weren't out of danger yet. The man in black, Jimmy, was still out there, and Karen knew they couldn't trust him. The stakes had just gotten higher. The bikers led the way through the narrow alley, and Karen kept close to the little girl, making sure she felt safe. They reached the parking lot where the bikes were waiting, their engines roaring to life as the bikers mounted their motorcycles. Karen didn't waste any time. "Let's go," she said, urgency in her voice. The group started their engines, and the sound of the motorcycles filled the air, a symbol of their determination. The convoy sped down the street, the wind whipping through Karen's hair as she rode next to Bear, who was carrying the girl's mother. The road ahead was long, and Karen knew they had to get the woman to safety. As they rode, Karen glanced over at the girl, who was still clinging to her. "Are you okay?" Karen asked gently. The girl nodded, though her eyes were filled with worry. "What do we do now?" she asked, her voice small. Karen hesitated for a moment before answering. "We keep you and your mom safe. We won't stop until this is over." The words felt hollow, even to her. She knew the road ahead would be anything but easy. The group rode in silence, the only sound the hum of the engines and the rush of wind. It felt like they were riding through a storm, both literal and figurative. The weight of the situation pressed down on Karen. She couldn't help but wonder who was behind all of this. Who were these men, and what did they want with the little girl's mother? She had to find out, but first, they needed to get to safety. After what felt like hours, they finally reached a safe house, an old, abandoned building that the bikers used as a hideout when things got too hot. It wasn't much, but it was secure. Bear carefully lowered the girl's mother onto a couch, while Karen quickly scanned the room. "Stay here with her," Karen instructed the girl, her voice soft but firm. The little girl nodded, sitting beside her mother and holding her hand. Karen turned to the bikers. "We need to figure out what's going on. Who are these men, and what do they want?" One of the bikers, a former detective named Clutch, stepped forward. "I've been doing some digging," he said, his voice low. "That man, Jimmy, he's not just some hired muscle. He works for a guy named Marcus Viper Santana. Big name in the underground world, racketeering, weapons trafficking, you name it. If he's involved, things just got a whole lot worse." Karen's heart sank as the realization hit her. "So, this isn't just about a bag. This is bigger than that." Clutch nodded grimly. "Much bigger. And if they've got their eyes on this girl's mother, it's because she knows something. We need to get ahead of them, or this could escalate fast." Karen clenched her fists, her mind racing. She had promised to keep the girl safe, and now, with this new information, the stakes were higher than ever. "What do we do now?" Dave asked, his voice heavy with the weight of the situation. Karen took a deep breath, her eyes flickering toward the door. "We find Viper, and we make sure he knows we're not backing down." The bikers nodded in agreement, their faces set with determination. They had no idea what they were about to face, but they knew one thing. They wouldn't stop until they got the answers they needed. Karen looked at the little girl one last time, her heart heavy. The road ahead would be dangerous, but there was no turning back now. The girl and her mother were in their care, and they would do whatever it took to protect them. "This isn't over," Karen whispered, her voice filled with resolve. "We're going to make sure you both get justice." And with that, the hunt for Marcus Viper Santana began. I can hear the hum of tension in the air as Karen, the bikers, and the little girl's mother huddled in the safe house. The mother, still unconscious and weak, rested on the couch while the group strategized. The walls of the rundown building seemed to close in on them as the weight of the situation settled in. Karen was determined. She had promised the little girl that she would keep her safe, and now, more than ever, she needed to follow through on that promise. They had discovered that the woman's abduction was far more than just a random attack. It was tied to a larger criminal operation led by Marcus Viper Santana, a dangerous figure in the underground world. Clutch, the former detective, had already begun working his connections, trying to gather more information on Viper and his network. But time was not on their side. "We need to act fast," Karen said, her voice steady but urgent. "Every second we waste, Viper and his men are getting closer." The bikers, their faces set in grim determination, nodded in agreement. "We'll get to Viper," Bear said, his voice deep and unwavering. "But we need to know where he is first." Karen looked at the group, feeling the weight of the moment. She had spent years working with law enforcement, but this was different. This wasn't just about catching criminals. This was about protecting a child and her mother from a force far more dangerous than they could have imagined. "Clutch, any luck finding his location?" Karen asked. Clutch looked up from his phone, his brow furrowed. "I've got some leads. Viper doesn't make it easy to track him down, but he's got a few known hangouts, safe houses, illegal businesses. We just need to narrow it down." "How long do we have?" Mia asked, her voice tense. "Not long," Clutch replied, his eyes meeting Karen's. "Viper's men have eyes everywhere. If they figure out we're coming for him, they'll move the woman. Or worse." Karen clenched her fists. The stakes were higher than ever, and the pressure was suffocating. She couldn't afford to lose time. "We're going to hit him hard and fast," Karen said, her tone resolute. "We're not just looking for answers anymore. We're bringing the fight to him." The bikers nodded, their expressions serious. The little girl, still clinging to Karen's side, looked up at her with a mixture of fear and hope in her eyes. "Will you find them?" she asked softly, her voice breaking. Karen knelt down in front of her, placing a hand on her shoulder. "Yes," Karen said firmly. "We're going to find them. And we're going to bring your mom home." With that, the group began to prepare for the next phase of their mission. They were ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, no matter how dangerous. The next morning, the bikers set out, their motorcycles roaring to life as they made their way toward their first lead. The safe house, a nondescript building tucked away in a quiet neighborhood, was the first stop. The air was thick with anticipation as the bikers pulled up, their engines cutting off with a sharp silence. Karen led the charge, her heart pounding in her chest as she approached the front door. She could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on her, but there was no turning back now. They had to find Viper. They had to end this. "Stay sharp," Karen whispered to the group. "We don't know what we're walking into." The door creaked as they entered, the dim light from the outside barely illuminating the room. The walls were covered in old posters and faded photographs, evidence of a time long past. But there was no time to dwell on the past. The group quickly moved through the building, checking each room for any sign of Viper or his men. As they reached the back of the house, a door creaked open, revealing a hidden stairwell leading down into the basement. Karen motioned for the group to stay silent as they descended, the air growing colder with each step. The basement was eerily quiet, the only sound the echo of their footsteps on the concrete floor. At the far end of the room, they saw it, an old desk, a stack of papers, and a safe hidden in the corner. "This is it," Clutch said, his voice barely a whisper. "Viper's got to be hiding something down here." Karen motioned for Bear to check the safe. "Let's see what we've got." Bear worked quickly, his large hands moving deftly as he unlocked the safe. The door creaked open, revealing a pile of documents and files. Karen's heart raced as she sifted through the papers, her eyes scanning for anything that could lead them to Viper. Then, she found it, a name. "Marcus Viper's real name is Robert Viper Santana," Karen muttered under her breath. "And it looks like he's got connections everywhere." The documents were a gold mine of information, including locations, names, and financial records. That tied Viper to a wide range of illegal activities. But there was one document that caught Karen's eye, a note with a location written on it. "This is it," she said, holding up the paper. "This is where he's hiding." The bikers exchanged looks, ready to move. Karen knew that Viper wasn't going to make this easy. They had one shot at this. If they didn't find him now, it could be too late. They gathered their things quickly, prepared for whatever came next. The time for planning was over. The time for action had arrived. With the address in hand, Karen and the bikers prepared to confront Marcus Viper Santana once and for all. This was their last chance to save the girl's mother and stop the criminal mastermind behind it all. As they left the basement, Karen felt a sense of purpose that pushed her forward. They were about to make their final move, and they weren't going to stop until justice was served. I can feel the urgency building as Karen and the bikers rev their engines, prepared to face Marcus Viper Santana. The information they had gathered was crucial, and the time to act was now. The address in her hand seemed to burn with significance. This was the moment they had been waiting for, and Karen was more determined than ever to put an end to this. As the convoy sped through the city streets, Karen's thoughts raced. She glanced back at the little girl, who was sitting behind one of the bikers, her face pale but determined. Her mother was still unconscious, but at least she was safe for the moment. "We're almost there," Karen whispered to herself. The wind whipped against her face as the engines roared louder, drowning out everything except the rush of adrenaline in her veins. The location was in a secluded area, an old industrial warehouse on the outskirts of town. The area was known for its seedy reputation, and Karen knew that it was the perfect hiding place for someone like Viper. As they approached the warehouse, the group slowed down, their senses heightened. They knew that any wrong move could lead to disaster. "Stay alert," Karen ordered, her voice steady, despite the tension. The bikers nodded in agreement, their eyes scanning the surroundings. They had made it this far, but the real test was just ahead. They parked their bikes at a safe distance, the sound of the engines dying down as they dismounted. Karen took a deep breath and looked at the group. "This is it," she said. "We go in, we find Viper, and we bring him down." No hesitation. Bear, the large, imposing biker, grunted in agreement. "Let's get it done." The group moved forward cautiously, sticking to the shadows as they approached the warehouse. The building was old and run down, with broken windows and peeling paint. It looked like a place long abandoned, but Karen knew better. They were walking into the lion's den. As they neared the entrance, Clutch, the former detective, signaled for everyone to stop. He crouched down and motioned for the others to follow suit. "There's movement inside," he whispered. "They're expecting us." Karen's heart skipped a beat. "How many?" she asked quietly. "Hard to say," Clutch replied. "But we're not dealing with amateurs. These are Viper's people." Karen's grip tightened around her gun. This wasn't going to be easy, but they couldn't back down now. "We move in fast," she said, her voice calm but firm. "Take out the guards, get to Viper, and end this." The group nodded, and they continued their approach, each step bringing them closer to their goal. They reached the door, and Bear took the lead, slowly pushing it open. The door creaked on its hinges, and the sound echoed through the empty warehouse. The air inside was thick with dust and the smell of oil and rust. The group entered, moving swiftly and silently through the maze of crates and debris. As they made their way deeper into the warehouse, they heard voices, a low murmur, barely audible over the sound of their footsteps. Karen motioned for the group to stop and crouch behind a stack of crates. She peered around the corner and saw two guards standing watch at the far end of the room, their backs turned. She signaled to Bear, who nodded and moved into position. With a swift motion, Bear took down one of the guards with a quick strike to the neck. The other guard barely had time to react before Clutch incapacitated him with a well-placed punch. Karen's breath caught in her throat. They were moving quickly, but the tension was palpable. They had to keep it that way, silent, efficient, and precise. They continued their approach, moving deeper into the building. As they neared the center, they found a large, dimly lit room. At the far end stood a desk, and behind it sat Marcus Viper Santana, his back to them. He was speaking into a phone, unaware of their presence. "This is it," Karen whispered. "We move now." They stormed into the room, their boots thundering on the floor. Viper turned, his eyes narrowing as he saw the bikers and Karen advancing toward him. His face twisted into a cold smile. "So, you found me," he said, his voice dripping with venom. "I have to admit, I didn't expect you to make it this far." Karen stepped forward, her voice steady but filled with resolve. "This ends now, Viper. You're going to pay for what you've done." Viper stood up slowly, his eyes scanning the group. "You think you can stop me? You think you can bring me down with a bunch of bikers?" he sneered. "You have no idea who you're dealing with." Karen's eyes narrowed. "I know exactly who you are, and I'm going to make sure you never hurt anyone again." Viper laughed, a dark, hollow sound. "You think you've won? You have no idea what you're up against." He reached under the desk, and Karen instinctively raised her weapon, but before she could react, the lights in the warehouse flickered. The sound of doors slamming open echoed through the building. Reinforcements had arrived. Karen's heart raced. They were surrounded. But she wasn't going to back down now. "We're not leaving without you, Viper," Karen said, her voice cutting through the chaos. The bikers moved into defensive positions, ready for whatever came next. The battle had only just begun. But Karen was determined. This was the moment they had been waiting for. They would stop Viper, no matter the cost. I can feel the weight of the moment as Karen and the bikers stood in the dimly lit room, surrounded by Marcus Viper's men. The air was thick with tension, and every muscle in Karen's body was taut, ready for the confrontation that was about to explode. Viper stood across the room, his cold eyes fixed on her, his smirk never wavering. The lights flickered again, and for a moment, everything seemed suspended in time. But Karen knew there was no turning back now. The bikers had her back, and they were all in. "This together. You really think you can stop me?" Viper said, his voice low and mocking. "You and your little gang? You're playing with fire." Karen's grip tightened on her gun as she took a step forward. "This ends now, Viper," she said, her voice cutting through the charged silence. "You've hurt too many people, and you're not going to get away with it." Viper's smirk faltered, just for a moment, but then he laughed darkly. "You think you're the hero here? You're just another pawn in a game you don't understand." He reached for something beneath his desk, and Karen's instincts screamed at her to act. "Watch out," she shouted, diving to the side. The sound of gunshots rang out, shattering the stillness of the room. Karen's heart raced as she rolled behind a stack of crates, narrowly avoiding the barrage of bullets. The bikers didn't hesitate. They returned fire, their weapons blazing as they took cover behind anything they could find. The chaos erupted all around them. The sound of gunfire echoed through the warehouse, the flashing lights from their weapons casting eerie shadows on the walls. "Keep moving," Karen yelled to the bikers. They didn't need any more instructions. They had trained for moments like this. They were in their element, working as one cohesive unit. Dave and Clutch provided cover fire while Bear and Mia moved to flank Viper's men, catching them off guard. The gunfire was deafening, but Karen's focus remained on Viper. She couldn't let him get away. She couldn't let this end with him still in control. Through the smoke and dust, she spotted him again, ducking behind a metal pillar. He was trying to make a run for it. "Not today," Karen muttered under her breath. She rose from her position and dashed across the room, keeping low to the ground. The sound of her boots pounding against the concrete floor was drowned out by the chaos around her. She could feel the adrenaline coursing through her veins as she sprinted toward Viper, her eyes locked on her target. He turned, his eyes widening in surprise as he saw her coming for him. He was too late. Karen tackled him to the ground, pinning him under her weight. "You're done," she spat, her hands tightening around his throat. Viper struggled beneath her, trying to break free, but she was relentless. "You've hurt so many people. You're not going anywhere." Viper's grip faltered, and for a moment, it seemed like he might give in. But then, his smirk returned, this time twisted with something darker. "You think you've won?" he sneered. "You have no idea what's coming. The game's not over yet." His words sent a chill down Karen's spine, but she didn't let him see her doubt. She leaned in closer, her voice cold. "It is over, and you're going to pay for everything you've done." Just as she said that, a loud crash echoed from the far side of the warehouse. A door slammed open, and more of Viper's men poured in. The bikers were still engaged in the firefight, but now, they were outnumbered. Karen's heart sank as she realized they were being overwhelmed. "We need to get out of here," Clutch shouted, his voice urgent as he took down another attacker. Now, Karen looked at Viper, still struggling beneath her, and then back at the bikers, who were holding their ground but clearly in danger. She made a snap decision. "Bear, Mia, get the others to the bikes. We're leaving now." Bear nodded, his face grim as he gestured for the group to move. Mia covered their retreat, taking down another man with precise shots. Karen knew that they couldn't afford to stay and finish this fight. Not with the odds stacked against them. Not when they had a chance to escape with the girl's mother still alive. With one final push, Karen shoved Viper aside and sprinted toward the exit. The bikers followed close behind, their boots pounding the floor as they made their way out of the warehouse. As they burst into the open air, the sound of the bikes starting up was a welcome relief. But Karen couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. They had survived this battle, But Viper was still out there, and his words haunted her. The game's not over yet. They had to regroup. They had to figure out their next move. The warehouse behind them was now a burning wreck, flames licking at the sky, but Karen's thoughts were elsewhere. They had a long road ahead, and it wasn't going to be easy. They needed to end this once and for all, and they weren't going to stop until they did. I can feel the weight of the moment as the bikers raced through the city streets, their motorcycles roaring in unison, the wind slicing through Karen's hair. The escape from the warehouse had been chaotic, but they were out now, and for a brief moment, there was a sense of relief. But Karen knew they couldn't afford to stop. Viper was still out there, and his words echoed in her mind. The game's not over yet. They had survived, but that wasn't enough. She needed to end this. End him, once and for all. Karen glanced behind her at the little girl, still holding tight to her mother, who was now awake but weak, the remnants of her ordeal clear in her eyes. The mother's face was bruised, but she was alive, and that was what mattered. The bikers rode in a tight formation, their expressions hard, focused. No one spoke, but the tension was palpable. Karen could sense the uncertainty in the air. They needed a plan, and they needed it fast. The further they went, the more Karen felt the weight of the situation pressing down on her. She had to act. This couldn't drag on any longer. They needed to hit Viper where it hurt, and they needed to do it now. The group pulled into a secluded area on the outskirts of town, away from the chaos of the city. Bear and the others dismounted, their boots hitting the ground with a heavy thud. "What's the plan?" Dave asked, his voice low. Karen took a deep breath, looking around at the group. "We're not just going to find Viper. We're going to bring him down, but we need more than just information. We need a way to trap him." Clutch, the former detective, stepped forward. "I've been going through the files we grabbed from the warehouse," he said. "Viper's got multiple safe houses, but the real target is his operation. He's got a shipment coming in tonight. A big one." Karen's eyes narrowed. "A shipment?" she repeated. "What's in it?" Clutch flipped through the papers. "It's weapons. Big-time stuff. Illegal firearms. This is the break we need." Karen's heart raced. "So, if we hit that shipment, we hit him where it hurts," she said, her voice steady but intense. "Exactly," Clutch confirmed. "We take down the shipment, and Viper loses his leverage. But it's going to be a heavily guarded operation." Karen's mind raced. This was their chance. If they could cut off Viper's supply chain, they could cripple his operation and force him out into the open. But she knew it wouldn't be easy. "We go in fast," Karen said, her voice sharp. "We take out the guards, grab the shipment, and then get out. No mistakes." Bear nodded, cracking his knuckles. "We've done worse." The group quickly began strategizing, laying out their plan of attack. They would split into two teams. One would move in from the west, the other from the east, ensuring that they surrounded the shipment before Viper's men even realized what was happening. Karen could feel the tension building as they prepared. The clock was ticking, and every second counted. "Let's move," Karen said, her voice low. "Time to end this." The bikers mounted their motorcycles again, the engines roaring to life as they sped toward their target. The night air was thick with anticipation, and the sound of the bikes filled the silence as they raced through the streets. They reached the location within an hour. The area was a sprawling warehouse complex, the perfect place for Viper to make his illicit deals. As they pulled into position, Karen's mind was focused on one thing: stopping Viper. She couldn't afford to think about anything else. She had to finish what she started. The group moved in quickly, their boots hitting the ground as they split into their assigned positions. Karen, Clutch, and Bear were on the western side, while the others moved to the eastern perimeter. As they approached the warehouse, the sound of movement inside reached their ears. Viper's men were already preparing for the shipment. They were moments away from moving in. Karen motioned for the others to stay low as they inched closer. They had to make their move now. The plan was simple: infiltrate the warehouse, neutralize the guards, and secure the shipment. But the closer they got, the more Karen felt the weight of the danger. They were surrounded by enemies who wouldn't hesitate to fight back. They had no choice but to press on. "On my signal," Karen whispered to Clutch. "We move in, fast and quiet." The seconds dragged on, the tension thick in the air. Then, the signal came. Karen sprang into action, charging forward, her gun raised as she took out the first guard in her path. Clutch followed close behind, his precise shots taking down two more. The rest of the bikers stormed the warehouse, their weapons at the ready. The sound of gunfire filled the night as Viper's men scrambled to react. The bikers moved with purpose, their training kicking in as they worked together to neutralize the threat. "We need the shipment," Karen shouted, her voice cutting through the chaos. "Find it and get it out now." Bear and Mia moved to secure the crates, pulling them out of the warehouse as quickly as they could. Karen, Clutch, and the others kept up the pressure, fending off any remaining threats. As the last of Viper's men were taken down, Karen felt the weight of the moment lift slightly. They had done it, but she knew the fight wasn't over yet. Viper was still out there, and they still had a job to finish. As they loaded the shipment onto the bikes, Karen's eyes scanned the horizon, her heart still pounding. "Let's move," she said, her voice low. "We're not done yet." The group mounted their motorcycles once again, speeding off into the night, ready for whatever came next. Viper's empire was crumbling, and they wouldn't stop until he was brought to justice. I can feel the rush of adrenaline as the group speeds through the winding roads, the rumble of their motorcycles echoing in the night air. The warehouse raid had been a success, but the battle was far from over. As they raced through the darkened streets, Karen's thoughts were focused on one thing: Viper. They had disrupted his operations, but he was still out there, and they needed to finish what they started. They couldn't let him slip through their fingers now. The shipment was secured, but Karen knew it was just a matter of time before Viper made his next move. She glanced at the rearview mirror, catching sight of the little girl, who was clinging to her mother in the back. The girl's eyes were filled with fear, but there was also a flicker of hope. Karen couldn't help but feel a deep sense of responsibility. The girl had been through so much, and it was up to her and the bikers to make sure she was safe. They turned a corner and pulled into a secluded spot, away from the main roads. The night was quiet, save for the sound of the bikes coming to a stop. Karen dismounted, her boots hitting the pavement with a heavy thud. "This is where we regroup," she said, turning to the group. "We can't afford to take any chances. Viper will retaliate, and we need to be ready." The bikers nodded, their faces hard with resolve. Bear and Mia immediately began setting up a perimeter, ensuring that no one could sneak up on them. Clutch was already on his phone, reaching out to his contacts to track down any more intel on Viper's whereabouts. The little girl's mother, still weak from the ordeal, sat on the edge of one of the bikes, her face pale but determined. Karen walked over to her, kneeling down to meet her eye to eye. "How are you holding up?" she asked softly. The woman forced a faint smile, but there was a deep sadness in her eyes. "I'm okay," she whispered, "but I'm scared. I don't know what's going to happen next." Karen placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "We'll make sure you're safe. We won't stop until Viper is behind bars." The woman nodded, her grip tightening on her daughter's hand. Karen stood and turned back to the group, her mind racing. They had a plan, but they couldn't afford to underestimate Viper. He was dangerous, and his connections ran deep. They needed to strike fast, before he could regroup and come after them. "Clutch, any luck on finding Viper's next move?" Karen called over. Clutch lowered his phone, his face grim. "I've got a location," he said. "There's a compound about 20 miles from here. It's off the grid. No one's been able to find it until now." Karen's heart skipped a beat. "This is it," she said, her voice steely. "We hit him now, before he has a chance to react." The bikers gathered their gear and mounted their bikes, their engines roaring to life once again. The time for hesitation was over. They had to stop Viper, and they had to do it now. The ride to the compound felt like it took forever, each minute dragging on as the stakes grew higher. Karen's mind raced with possibilities. What if they were walking into a trap? What if Viper was already waiting for them? She pushed the thoughts aside. They had a job to do. As they neared the compound, the area grew more desolate, the buildings in worse shape. This was no ordinary hideout. This was a place where Viper could make his last stand, and they had to be ready for anything. The group slowed down as they approached, the bikes moving cautiously now, each biker scanning the surroundings. "Stay sharp," Karen whispered, her voice tight with anticipation. "We don't know what we're walking into." They reached the gates of the compound, which were reinforced with metal and barely opened to allow entry. A single guard stood in front, his eyes scanning the approaching bikers. He wasn't expecting them, but that didn't mean he wouldn't put up a fight. Bear and Mia moved ahead, taking out the guard before he could react. Karen and Clutch led the group inside, moving quickly but quietly through the compound. The air was thick with tension. Every footstep felt like it could trigger an alarm. "We've got to find Viper before his men do," Karen muttered, glancing at the others. "He's close. I can feel it." The group moved deeper into the compound, taking out any guards who crossed their path. They were a well-oiled machine, each person working in sync to neutralize the threat. As they reached the center of the compound, Karen saw it, a large building with heavy metal doors. This was it. Viper was inside. They moved quickly toward the entrance, weapons raised. But before they could reach the door, a familiar voice echoed through the air. "You made it this far, but it's over now." Karen froze. Viper's voice was cold, mocking. He had been waiting for them. "You really think you can take me down?" Viper's figure appeared in the doorway, flanked by several of his men. His smirk was as cold as ever. "You've done your best, but it's too late now." Karen's heart pounded, but she refused to back down. "You're done, Viper," she said, her voice low and steady. "This ends today." Viper's smirk faded, replaced by a look of cold fury. "We'll see about that." He nodded to his men, and they moved to surround them. The final showdown had begun. I can feel the tension in the air as Viper's men surround them, their guns drawn, their eyes cold and calculating. Karen stands firm, her heart pounding in her chest, but she refuses to show fear. The bikers behind her are ready, weapons raised, eyes locked on the enemy. The time for talking is over. Viper's smirk fades as he steps forward, his eyes burning with anger. "You think you can come into my world and take me down?" he sneers. "You're nothing. You're just a bunch of outlaws playing hero." Karen's gaze doesn't waver. "This ends today, Viper. We're not afraid of you." Viper's eyes flicker with rage, but he gestures for his men to hold their ground. "I've built an empire. You think you can destroy it just like that?" he says, his voice low and menacing. "You have no idea who you're messing with." "We know exactly who you are," Karen shoots back. "And we're going to make sure you're stopped once and for all." With a quick motion, Viper signals to his men. The tension in the room is suffocating, and for a moment, everything seems to hang in the balance. But then, the first shot rings out. It's fast and precise. Clutch is the first to react, his gun firing in return, taking down one of Viper's men before they even have a chance to fully react. The bikers spring into action, their guns blazing as they take down the other guards, moving with practiced precision. The warehouse erupts into chaos as gunfire fills the air. Karen moves swiftly, her heart racing, her focus razor-sharp as she takes out two of Viper's men with deadly accuracy. Bear, Mia, and the others move quickly, taking down anyone who dares stand in their way. Viper's men are trained, but the bikers are faster, and they're fighting for something more. Karen doesn't have time to think. She moves toward Viper, her gun raised, but just as she gets close, a man steps in front of her, blocking her path. She fires without hesitation, taking him down, but Viper has already disappeared behind a wall of smoke and dust. "He's getting away," Mia shouts. "We can't let him slip through our fingers." Karen nods, her eyes scanning the smoke-filled room. She can't lose him now. Viper must be stopped. They can't afford to let him escape. With no time to waste, Karen signals to the others. "Split up. We're closing in." The bikers fan out, each one taking a different path through the maze of crates and machinery. Karen moves with purpose, her gun steady as she searches for any sign of Viper. Her mind is clear, focused only on finding him, on ending this nightmare once and for all. As she rounds a corner, she sees him. Viper, standing at the back of the warehouse, a gun in his hand, ready to fight his way out. "It's over, Viper," Karen calls out, her voice steady despite the pounding in her chest. Viper laughs, the sound hollow and bitter. "You think you've won?" he sneers. "This is just the beginning. You'll never stop me. No one can." Karen takes a step forward, her gun raised, but Viper raises his own, pointing it directly at her. For a split second, the world slows down, and everything goes quiet. Then, without warning, the gunfire rings out. Karen dives to the side, narrowly avoiding the bullet. The sound of the shot echoes in her ears, and the adrenaline surges through her veins. She can't let him get away. She can't let him win. The bikers are still engaged in the battle, but they're making progress. Karen feels the weight of the situation pressing down on her, but she pushes it aside. This is the moment she's been waiting for. This is the final showdown. Viper is cornered. There's no way out for him now. You're done, Karen says, her voice unwavering. It's over. Viper glares at her, his finger tightening on the trigger. But before he can fire, there's a sudden explosion, loud, blinding. The force of it knocks everyone off their feet, sending them sprawling to the ground. Karen's ears are ringing, and for a moment, everything is disorienting. Smoke fills the room, making it nearly impossible to see. But she doesn't hesitate. She pushes herself up, her body sore, and scans the area. She can still hear Viper's men scrambling, trying to regroup, but the explosion has thrown them off balance. Karen spots Viper again, standing amid the smoke, a look of shock on his face. He's disoriented, but he's still dangerous. The time for hesitation is over. She charges toward him, her gun raised, and with one final shot, she takes him down. Viper falls to the ground, his gun clattering beside him. Karen stands over him, her chest heaving with exertion, her eyes locked on his lifeless body. The fight is over. They've won. The bikers gather around, their expressions a mix of relief and exhaustion. They've fought hard for this moment, and now it's finally over. The little girl's mother is safe, and the nightmare is over. Karen takes a deep breath, feeling the weight of it all settle on her shoulders. They've stopped Viper, but the battle for justice isn't over. There will always be more to fight for. But for now, Karen knows they've made a difference. And that's all that matters. I can feel the weight lifting as the sound of gunfire fades into the distance. The battle is over, but the air is still thick with tension. Karen stands over Viper's lifeless body, her chest heaving with exertion, her mind racing. The bikers are still catching their breath, their eyes scanning the area to ensure there are no more threats. The smoke from the explosion hangs heavy in the air, but it's finally starting to settle. The little girl's mother, still weak but alive, is sitting in the corner, holding her daughter tightly. Karen watches them for a moment, the relief washing over her. They've done it. They've stopped Viper, and they've kept the girl and her mother safe. The mission is over. But even as the adrenaline fades, Karen can't shake the feeling that there's something more to be done. She looks around at the group of bikers, their faces hard but proud. They've been through hell, but they've come out the other side together. Is everyone okay? She asks, her voice steady but tired. Bear, the largest of the bikers, grunts in response. We're good. Few scrapes, but nothing we can't handle. Mia, always the quiet one, nods in agreement. No casualties on our side, she says, her voice calm despite the chaos. Karen nods, relieved but not yet satisfied. They've won the battle, but the war isn't over. What about the police? She asks, her eyes scanning the scene. We need to get the authorities involved, make sure Viper's empire crumbles for good. Clutch, the former detective, pulls out his phone, typing quickly. Already on it, he says. I've got connections. We'll make sure Viper's operation is completely dismantled. Karen breathes a sigh of relief. The authorities will take care of the aftermath. For now, the bikers can finally take a step back and know they've done what they set out to do. The little girl looks up at Karen, her eyes still filled with uncertainty, but softened by the comfort of knowing her mother is safe. Karen walks over to her, kneeling down to meet her eye to eye. You're safe now, Karen says softly, her voice full of warmth. No one's going to hurt you anymore. You're safe with us. The little girl's face breaks into a small, hesitant smile. Thank you, she whispers. Karen smiles back, feeling the weight of the girl's gratitude. She didn't do this for the thanks, but it feels good to know they've made a difference. You're welcome, Karen says. We'll make sure you both get back to where you belong. The bikers begin to pack up, their movements efficient and purposeful. They've accomplished their goal, but Karen knows the journey isn't over. There's always more work to be done. As they load the bikes back up, Karen's mind races. She thinks about Viper's empire, the many people he's hurt, the lives he's destroyed. There's so much more to uncover. We need to make sure Viper's men are all accounted for, she says, turning to Clutch. We can't leave any loose ends. Clutch nods. I'll handle it. We'll make sure they're all rounded up. Karen looks at the mother and daughter one more time. They've been through so much, and now they can start their healing process. It won't be easy, but they'll have a chance at a normal life. Karen feels a sense of peace settle over her as she walks toward her bike. They've made the world a little safer today. The battle's over, but the work isn't finished. As they ride off into the night, Karen looks back at the warehouse one last time. Viper's reign is over, but she knows there will always be more to fight for. There will always be more people to protect. The journey never truly ends. But for tonight, they've won. And that's enough. I can feel the tension slowly ebbing away as the bikers ride through the quiet streets, their engines humming in unison. The chaos of the warehouse, the gunfire, the danger, it's all behind them now. But Karen knows this isn't the time to relax. Not yet. She glances in her rearview mirror, catching a glimpse of the little girl, her small face still filled with uncertainty, but now softened by the relief of knowing her mother is safe. Karen's heart aches for the girl. She's been through so much, too much for someone so young. The mother, still exhausted but alert, sits behind one of the bikers, holding her daughter tightly. They've made it through this nightmare, but Karen knows the healing process won't be quick or easy. She shakes her head, pushing the thoughts aside. They've won today. That's what matters. They've stopped Viper. They've saved lives. And they've brought these two women back from the edge. We're almost there. Bear calls out from the front, breaking her thoughts. Time to get them to safety. Karen nods, her focus sharp as she watches the road ahead. They're heading to a safe house, an old farmhouse on the outskirts of town where the bikers can regroup. They've got to lay low, let things settle, and make sure that Viper's men can't trace them. The road is familiar, but it's never felt more like a lifeline than it does now. As they pull up to the farmhouse, Karen can feel the weight of the last few hours catch up with her. It's been a long ride, and there's still work to be done, but she allows herself a moment to breathe, to let the adrenaline subside. The bikers dismount, their boots hitting the dirt with a heavy thud. Bear and Mia help the little girl and her mother off the bike, guiding them toward the farmhouse. The others start unloading gear, making sure the place is secure. They're safe for now, Clutch says, walking up to Karen. He looks calm, his usual steady presence a comfort in the chaos. But we need to keep moving. Viper's empire won't just fall apart on its own. Karen nods, her mind already turning. What's next? Clutch pulls out a set of papers from his jacket, scanning them quickly. We've got connections with law enforcement. They're already moving on Viper's remaining men. But we need to make sure Viper's network is completely dismantled. This goes deeper than just him. If we don't take down the rest of his operation, it'll only be a matter of time before another player steps up. Karen glances over at the little girl and her mother, who are sitting inside, trying to regain some semblance of normalcy. We can't let that happen, she says, her voice firm. We finish this once and for all. No more running. No more hiding. Bear walks up, his brow furrowed. You're right, he says. But we need to be careful. Viper's people aren't going to just give up. If they know we're coming for them, they'll start making moves. Karen's mind races. They've already taken down the main source of the operation, Viper, but there are still many loose ends to tie up. The bikers can't afford to stop now. They need to make sure Viper's influence is gone, once and for all. We need to set a trap, Karen says, her eyes hardening with resolve. Get the rest of Viper's men in one place. We take them down, and we make sure they don't have a chance to retaliate. I'll get on it, Clutch says, already reaching for his phone. He starts making calls, his voice low and steady. Karen stands for a moment, taking in the situation. She watches the little girl play with her mother, the peace between them a stark contrast to the storm they've just come through. Karen knows this isn't the end, not yet. There's always more work to be done, and there's always someone out there willing to pick up where Viper left off. But for now, she allows herself a moment of peace. She turns back to the bikers, who are already preparing for the next phase of the mission. All right, Karen says, her voice commanding. Let's finish this. They've come this far. They can't stop now. The bikers begin to load up their bikes again, ready for whatever comes next. The safe house may be a temporary refuge, but Karen knows they can't stay here long. The mission isn't over. It's just beginning. As they ride out once again, the sun begins to set behind them, casting a golden glow over the horizon. But Karen knows that the real fight is just ahead. The final showdown with Viper's men is approaching, and she's ready. No more running. No more hesitation. This time, they finish what they started. And no matter what happens, they'll make sure Viper and his operation are a thing of the past. I can feel the weight of everything they've been through pressing down on Karen as the sun rises over the horizon. The battle has been fought, and the war is finally over. Viper is gone, his empire in ruins. The bikers ride back into town, their faces set with determination, knowing they've done what they set out to do. The little girl's mother, still recovering but safe, sits behind one of the bikers. The girl, who once trembled in fear, now has a glimmer of hope in her eyes as she looks out at the world around her. It's been a long journey, and the road ahead is still uncertain, but for the first time in a long while, it feels like the weight of the world has been lifted off their shoulders. Karen glances over at Clutch, who's riding next to her. "Do you think Viper's men will still come after us?" she asks. Clutch shakes his head. "We've taken down the heart of the operation. With Viper gone, they'll scatter, and we'll make sure they're finished off." Karen nods, but there's still a nagging feeling in her chest. Viper may be gone, but the fight to protect the innocent never really ends. As the bikers continue their ride, the town looms in the distance, its outline growing clearer with each passing mile. It's a quiet place, a place that doesn't know the chaos and danger that have been lurking just beneath the surface. But Karen knows they've made it safer. They've given the girl and her mother a second chance. "We'll get them settled," Karen says, her voice steady. "Then we'll lay low for a while. There's always more work to do, but for now, they need peace." They reach the small farmhouse that's been set up as a safe house, the place where the girl and her mother will stay until they're ready to move on. The bikers help them inside, making sure they're comfortable and settled in. The little girl smiles at Karen, a soft, grateful expression on her face. "Thank you," she says, her voice barely above a whisper. Karen smiles back, kneeling down to meet her eye. "You're safe now," she says softly. "You can rest." The girl nods, and for the first time, Karen sees the weight of fear lift from her shoulders. The mother sits down beside her, wrapping her arms around her daughter, the bond between them stronger than ever. As the bikers begin to gather their gear, preparing to leave, Karen steps outside for a moment of peace. The early morning air is crisp, and she takes a deep breath, letting it fill her lungs. It's over. Viper's reign of terror is finished. The city is safer, the girl is safe, and for a brief moment, everything feels right. But Karen knows that this peace is temporary. There will always be more people who need protecting, more battles to fight. That's the reality of their world. The bikers aren't heroes. They're a necessary force in a world that doesn't always play fair. As she watches the sun rise higher into the sky, Karen hears the rumble of engines behind her. She turns to see the bikers, ready to ride out again. "We're heading out," Bear says, his voice gruff but filled with a sense of accomplishment. "Time to move on." Karen nods, her heart heavy with the knowledge that they'll keep moving, keep fighting. "Let's go," she says, turning toward her bike. There's always more to do. They ride off, their engines roaring into the distance, the town fading behind them. The road ahead is long, but they know what they're fighting for. It's not just about bringing down criminals or saving lives. It's about protecting those who can't protect themselves, about standing up for the innocent, and about making the world a little safer, one ride at a time. As they disappear into the horizon, Karen knows that no matter where the road takes them next, they will keep going. They'll fight until they can't anymore. And they'll never stop fighting for what's right.